I'm ready. Um, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Sandy Parnas um, from the Ward 3 Democrats and the Ward 3 Democrat Blue Wave. This is my daughter Naomi Parnas, who is sheltering in place with us since she left Boston in March. Um, I wanted to go over just generally what we're doing here tonight. Um, Many of you probably know why we're here. Um, we're here to support a giving circle in North Carolina, which is supporting 19 candidates for state legislature in North Carolina, and we're trying to flip North Carolina into a blue state legislature, Democratic state legislature. Tonight, we're happy to have Nicole Quick, who is running for the House of Representatives in the state of North Carolina, as our guest, and we'll be hearing from her in a few moments. I guess there are a few things just to go over. One is that our efforts have been in Ward 3 Blue Wave and other organizations go back to 2017 when we started supporting Virginia candidates in all respects. This year, though, given COVID-19, we aren't going to be knocking on doors, it doesn't look like. Pretty certain of that. So our efforts going to be centered around raising funds for candidates. We're going to have some postcards. We're going to be just doing some mailers and phone calls, and it's going to be essential to get out as much of the vote as we can. We don't want to be short tens of thousands of votes like we were in 2016 and lose the White House, lose the Congress, and we want to pick up a lot of state Senate seats, a state and local legislatures. I think when we started this in 2017, there were 38 state legislatures that were controlled by Republicans, and we're starting to nibble into that lead and getting closer to at least an equal split. We're not there yet in state houses. State houses are pivotal, as I sent out in my invitation. We have the 2020. As a result of the 2020 census, we're going to be having redistricting, and congressional redistricting is handled by state legislatures. So we want to have Democratic state legislatures. We want to build up a strength of the local parties in the states. We want to have stronger organizations from the bottom up. We want to give us future candidates and future organizations that support both the state and local tickets. And as we said, many of the important issues that are in our minds these days are controlled by the states, not by the federal government. North Carolina is inherently flippable. We can flip it from red to blue. I believe that we need to pick up 6 seats in a 120 seat House of Representatives in the state. We have a lot of things going for us. I looked at some polls this morning that showed both Joe Biden, Cal Cunningham, who's the candidate for a state for the senator for the U.S. Senate, and Governor Roy Cooper, in particular, is way out in front in existing polls. We can't rely on polls. We can't wait to see what happens. We've been caught with our pants down, I guess, in too many elections where we sat back, took it easy, and we don't want what happened in 2016 happening to us again. So we need to ensure that every person who's going to vote for our candidates gets out and votes for our Democratic candidates up and down the ticket. The only poll that counts is the one that ends is election day, and there was a Joe Biden event last night. Some of us attended, and one of the speakers mentioned, in regard to resting on our laurels, that we want to have a big victory. We want a victory. We'll take any victory, but we want a large victory so that the people on the other side won't be contesting the election, which is a concern for some of us. So that pretty much concludes my remarks. I know many of you are actively involved in supporting national races, some of the senatorial races, and I know many of you are active in other progressive causes. And please keep that up. And to the extent that you can help us out, either as a donor or doing postcards or phone calls or whatever else we come up with, we would love for you to help us out and turn North Carolina blue. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Naomi to say a few words.
Hi, everyone. That was a landline you heard. I don't know if you know what that is. Hopefully it won't ring again.
Us old people.
So I just wanted to talk about kind of what inspired me. So some of you who know me know this, but my birthday is in the first week of November, which can be pretty tough. So in 2018, I told my parents that for my birthday, I wanted to go somewhere. I was like, I don't know where, but we have to go somewhere and knock on doors. My birthday was election day that year. And so we ended up going up to Pennsylvania. We stayed in Philly and had some great food. And then we drove up every morning to Bucks County and knocked on doors.
In the pouring rain.
In the pouring rain. And
for 3 days.
For 3 days.
In the pouring rain.
And we had an incredible time, and we met some amazing people, and we helped elect Perry Warren and Steve Santasiero to their state legislature. It was really exhilarating, and I loved it. I knocked on doors before in Virginia, especially for presidential elections, but this was just really fun doing it in a midterm year, and I knew that I couldn't wait until November this year to start getting involved. I really wanted to make a difference. In DC, sometimes it can be a little disheartening. You feel like your vote doesn't matter that much. We're a Democratic state. We kind of know where our electoral votes are going to go, and it can be hard to feel like you don't have a voice, but this is a way that we can. And we can really impact election cycles in a way that's really important. And so I decided to help do that and to help flip a state legislature. And this is an effort that I know makes a huge difference. Both our dollars and our time make a bigger difference working on state, local, and legislative campaigns than they do when we work on national campaigns. And the ballot works upwards. So I think it's really important because we can see this effort pay off in federal and national and statewide elections. So I can't wait to see how much work you guys do in the next couple of months, and hopefully on November 6th, which is 3 days after the election and my birthday in 2020, I will still be celebrating this huge win that we're gonna have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth, back to you.
Oh.
Sorry. You'd think I'd be better at this because I do this all the time. We're going to kick it directly to our candidate, and then I'll come back later. But what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Nicole because she's here, and we're so excited that she is here. She's taking valuable time out of her campaign right now to be with us. So we would love to hear all about your campaign, why you're running, why your district is winnable, and what it's going to mean, just to throw a couple ideas. I'm sure you've got a pitch. But then if everyone has questions, if you can put them in the chat, that would be helpful, because we want to make sure we get to all the questions. And I'll bring the questions to you, Nicole. You don't have to worry about that. But go on. We want to hear from you. So why are you running? That's when we can kick it off.
So the question I get asked the most often is that one: why am I running? And the short answer is my son Tad. My child is brilliant, says every mother everywhere, right? In addition to being brilliant, my son happens to be on the autism spectrum. When we got ready to send him off to 3rd grade at our neighborhood school, I found out that they did not have a special needs teacher. That summer, our legislature had made dramatic cuts to the education budget here. In my county alone, 37 teachers were laid off, including the special ed teacher at our school. And they were laid off according to seniority. So there was no one there to fill that spot. Now, I knew Tad was going to struggle without that support, but I was fortunate. I was able to keep him home and homeschool for 2 years. After 2 years, he was ready to go off to elementary, middle school. And at that school, he did have support. He did have an EC teacher. He had a great guidance counselor. He had wonderful people to support him. What he didn't have was air conditioning for 2 years in North Carolina. So when it got hot, the teachers would have to take the kids outside and have class outside. They also didn't have a math teacher the first semester of his 6th grade year. The math teacher left at the beginning of the year and went to Virginia, where she could get paid a decent wage. Now, Tad is fine. He's 16 now, and we gave him the support he needed to get him through this. But what I discovered is our story wasn't unique. This was happening all across the state. And our kids deserve better. When I was growing up in North Carolina, we had some of the best public schools in the nation. We created Smart Start. It was a model for early childhood development. And we could do that again. But we've got to invest in our schools. And to do that, we've got to flip the state legislature. Now, the second question I get asked most often is why now? Why did I decide to run now? And the answer to that is I was a plaintiff on 3 gerrymandering suits in North Carolina. North Carolina, like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, was horribly gerrymandered. We had a state representative, David Lewis, who said the only reason 10 out of 13 of our congressional seats were gerrymandered Republican is because he couldn't gerrymander more than 10 out of 13. So I was a plaintiff on 3 of those suits with Common Cause. And the last one we won last fall was the partisan gerrymander of our state legislature. The districts were redrawn last September. The seat that I'm running for went from leaning 12 points Republican to a 2 to 3 point race. Recent polling shows that it's a dead heat. It's a toss-up. It's one of the most flippable seats in the state, and it's one of those 6 we have to take back the state house this fall. Now, just to give you an idea of how competitive it has gotten, I'm doing an interview for NPR tomorrow that's going to be on All Things Considered, talking about the competitiveness of this race. And my opponent just got $350,000 in television ad buys dumped into this race. So you can see there's a lot up for grabs. Now, just so you know, the guy I'm running against, he's the Republican majority whip here. He's responsible for HB2. He's responsible for North Carolina having the lowest corporate tax rate in the nation, aside from the 2 states that don't have corporate tax rates, and simultaneously devastating our education budget, refusing to expand Medicaid, and giving us the worst unemployment benefits in the nation. So he needs to go. We can do a lot of good things if we flip this legislature. The first thing on the agenda is to expand Medicaid and help 500,000 North Carolinians get health care coverage. They have refused to expand Medicaid here. That money keeps going to other states. There's no reason for them not to do it except pure partisanship. And we could be helping people. There are more people right now during this COVID pandemic who need that help. So it becomes, how do we make this happen? We can't knock on doors. At the beginning of March, we were knocking on 1,500 doors a week. We can't do that anymore. So we transitioned all of that over to phone banking. That is our number one way of one-on-one contact with voters in the district. I've got to convince 3,000 voters above our Democratic base to vote for me. And that means reaching out to those Democrats who will vote Democrat, but don't always come out to the polls. And it also means reaching out to those moderate, unaffiliated voters in the district. My district is split into thirds. It's a third Democrat, a third Republican, a third unaffiliated, but it is winnable. So we need help with phone banks. We need help with postcards. That's our second touch of those voters. After we phone bank those persuadable voters, we are relying on postcards as a follow-up to make sure that they don't forget about us. And we need money. I am not taking any money from corporate PACs. My opponent takes money from Duke Energy, and then he votes to give his constituents a rate hike to pay for their coal ash cleanup so they can maintain their 10% profit margin and don't have to have that come out of their revenues, right? I'm not taking any money from corporate PACs. I still outrose him. Is that a word? I still outraised him last quarter. I have right now about $60,000 more on hand than he does. I've had 98% of my fundraising come from individual donors. Most of those are donating $50 or less. And we have a huge grassroots support here. So this race is winnable. We appreciate everything you folks are doing to help, and we're asking that you continue to help us take back this legislature and help the people of North Carolina. And the best ways to do that are your donations. They are through phone banking. They are through postcards. Those are the three best ways to help right now. My race is not the only one that is getting that outside money dumped into TV ads. There is a conservative group who is flooding money into these targeted races right now because they know they're up for grabs. So we need all the help we can get, and we appreciate everything you do. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much. So we have our first question. Claire Everhart, who's a great friend of ours, she was instrumental. We formed a group called Flip VA in 2017 where we organized all the organizers because there was all this energy. So she's been doing amazing work. She asked, she would come on video, but she's having some troubles. You mentioned healthcare, awesome. Any other legislation you're excited about working on, and or legislation you know Republicans will try and pass if they don't have folks like you there to stop it?
Right. So yes, we're going to expand Medicaid. We're going to have a state-run ACA if we get the majority. We currently don't, so our insurance commissioner can't negotiate prices with the insurance companies here. So we're going to do that. We're going to fully fund the education budget. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but our state actually, in our state constitution, promises a good public school education to all the citizens of the state. And this past year, our legislature lost a lawsuit because we're not providing that. We are below national average in per pupil funding. We're below national average in teacher pay. We're having a lot of teacher flight as a result, and there are inequities across the state. We are actually have huge inequities between races in the state of our educational achievement. So those are all things that we want to target and to try to repair. Currently, our Republican legislature is trying to funnel money from our public education system to charter schools. And most of those are for-profit charter schools. And they're leading to a resegregation of our schools here because poor families in our minority communities can't afford to drive their kids across the county to a charter school. Even if it is free, they don't provide busing. they don't provide reduced lunches. So it's not really available to lower socioeconomic groups. So we are definitely going to focus on education. We're going to focus on healthcare. I am a big proponent of independent redistricting. Republicans have been horrible about gerrymandering our state, but that doesn't mean that the Democrats here have never done it. I think the temptation's too great when you get in power to try to keep that power. So I fully support independent redistricting commission. I would also like to restore our employment benefits to the level they were at before they were cut. And I think that's going to be important as we come out of COVID. We just had our moratorium on evictions expire in the state. Our state unemployment benefits ran out a few weeks ago, and now the federal unemployment benefits are running out. So we've got a situation where there's potential downward spiral as people aren't getting income and they lose their homes. It's very hard to recover from that, right? So it's hard to come back homeless and get a job or to attend virtual school, you know, if you don't have a place to live. So we're going to be looking at a lot of things we can do about that. We're going to be looking at addressing prison reform. One of the legislators in my county is responsible for making police body cam footage private. The public doesn't have access to it. And we want to increase that accountability. We want all of that police body cam footage to be made public. We want a registry, public registry of officers who have had disciplinary issues, have used excessive force. So these are all things that we want to work on when we take back this majority.
Okay, Nicole, I have another question for you from Sheena. Sheena says, Nicole, you believe in quality education. How do you feel about education, for example, Pell Grants and electronic tablets inside of juvenile detention centers and adult prisons and jails?
I do support that. I actually advocated and pushed for Raise the Age in North Carolina. We were the last state in the country to raise the age. Previously, we had 16-year-olds being jailed, imprisoned with adults. So we just got that passed in the past year or so. And I think that the key, especially for juveniles, is to re-educate, rehabilitate, so that, you know, they have an opportunity for life beyond being a felon. I think that, you know, we don't want to cripple kids at that young of an age. We want them to be able to move forward and be productive and successful members of society. The same is true with adults. You know, if we educate and train them for life outside of prison, then we reduce recidivism. We reduce our prison population. And again, they become productive, contributing members of society. I hope that answers the question. Yes?
Sheena, do you have a follow-up, or was that, you want to give a thumbs up? You can unmute too if you want to follow up, but.
Very good, Nicole. I appreciate that. I have a passion for working with men and women with criminal backgrounds. It's hard for them. It was hard before the pandemic, so it's certainly going to be hard for them, for those that are, you know, returning back home. So I appreciate that, and you keeping those issues in mind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Ann Cowman has a couple questions. It sounds like she wants to know more about the district. I gave her the racial breakdowns, but the Ballotpedia doesn't tell the story of income, occupations, kind of give a snapshot of that. And then she has a follow-up question about what your environmental priorities are. We all know that North Carolina's had some really bad, well, I don't even know how to put it into words, so I will let you.
All right, so this district, it is mostly rural. It's the eastern part of Guilford County, so it's outside of Greensboro, which is one of the major metropolitan areas, but it is kind of the suburbs, rural area outside of Greensboro. There are a few small municipalities here, very small town, southern towns, and there's a lot of farming. We have dairy. We do have an emerging, I would say, brewery business here, small brewery business. And we have a nice little vineyard in the district, but it is predominantly rural. So what has happened with this district is I-40 runs right through the middle of it. North and south of that, it stays kind of red, moderate to conservative. Right along the I-40 corridor, you have lots of development of housing communities, apartments, and people are using those areas as bedroom communities to live in and then go work in the city, right? Because it's less expensive out here. So we are getting more progressive and younger people along that corridor. So we are becoming a little more blue out here, but it is still, it still does tend to be moderate or lean a little conservative. In addition to that, we have a growing Latinx population. It's only about 2% of the registered voters now, but the adjoining county has a large Latinx population working in their farming industry. And that county has been cooperating with ICE. There's a huge ICE presence there. Our sheriff in this county, we lobbied him to stop cooperating with ICE and to stop the traffic stops at schools and things that were creating a sense of terror among the Latinx community. So some of those folks from the neighboring county are starting to move into this county and shifting into my district to escape the policies in the county next door. As far as economy, I used to work in the textile industry here. It used to be huge. A lot of that business went overseas. Same with our furniture industry. We lost a lot of good paying jobs with that. And we haven't really trained workers for the emerging industry so that they could transition into new jobs that pay them as well. So one of my focuses is work development programs such as free community college or apprenticeships, mentorships to help retrain workers for emerging industries. Honda Jet came here recently. We were delighted to get that industry in Guilford County, but we do need to offer some specialty training for people who would be taking those jobs. I'm trying to think what else to tell you about this district. That's all that comes to mind as far as demographics and things right now. There was a secondary question to that, environmental priorities. Okay, so I am concerned about holding Duke Energy accountable. We currently do not regulate polluters in this state. They kind of get a free pass. So I do want to hold them accountable, have stricter regulations. We are concerned about coal ash cleanup. We are concerned about Chemours plant is dumping PFAS into our water supplies. So we're getting a lot of contamination of water across the state. They actually operate in the eastern part of the state near the coast, but the contamination's gotten so bad in the rivers down there that it is evaporating into the atmosphere and actually coming down in rain this far west. So it's contaminating our water supply and we're not even near them. Another issue I'm concerned about are hog farms in the eastern part of the state. We get a lot of pollution and waste, and they have located those hog farms near poor minority communities, and they won't let, they've reversed some of the laws that would allow those communities to obtain any sort of retribution for that pollution. The polluters are able to get away with it, and the people who live there can't move away. There's nothing they can do about it. They go outside, it's in the air, they smell it, they don't want to be outside, they're breathing it. So there are many, many environmental issues that we need to address, starting with just regulating more and holding polluters accountable.
So that's all amazing. I was just highlighting the Duke Energy settlement, which was the largest settlement that's ever, they had basically they've been the worst actor, and so they've had the biggest fine levied against them. And I know this group did a lot of work in 2018. And part of the work that we did, something that it highlighted was we were planning on coming out and canvassing, but you had 2 hurricanes that parked themselves right on top of you. And that meant that we couldn't go down and canvass. It also meant there was terrible flooding, and that flooding led to hog waste. You had fecal matter flooding into towns, into homes. You had coal ash. I mean, it just felt like an environmental disaster. And my understanding was that part of the responsibility for that lay with the GOP, because even though you had good laws on the books, they were not enforcing them. So that was part of what we had heard. All right, we've got another. Someone is mentioning a weekend of action, which is great. Austin, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
No, I trust you.
All right. What strategies are you using to navigate the reality of COVID to get out the vote, which I think ties in nicely to maybe some work we could be doing here in DC to support your efforts?
So we have a giant weekend of action coming up this weekend. I just want to pitch that because my campaign manager will kill me if I don't. We're less than 100 days to election, of course, so we have a big weekend of action coming up with phone banking this weekend, trying to reach as many voters as we can.
Thank you.
So as far as messages, I see the question, how do messages appeal to non-Democrats? So we've had to do that in our district because we are going to have to convince some of those moderate unaffiliated voters or some of those more moderate voters to vote for me. And, you know, my real focus is on issues of working people and families. My opponent has been such a friend to corporations and CEOs and their shareholders. And I want to work on issues that affect working families. And that is controlling the cost of health care. That is a good public school education. That is jobs that pay a living wage and transitioning from those lost manufacturing jobs. And that is, not everyone cares about the environmental issues, but when it is in their backyard, it's polluting their well water and their rates are being hiked to pay for that cleanup, they do start to feel it and care, even if they aren't progressive. So those are all issues that we're using to appeal across party lines that affect everyday voters. And specifically, we have a tax issue here where my opponent pushed through a sales tax on services. We had never had that before. You went to get your car fixed, you paid a sales tax on parts. Now you also have to pay a sales tax on services. That's a regressive tax that hurts working people. It's not going to hurt people who can afford to go out and buy a new car. So those are the issues that are speaking to working families and do cross party lines.
So I have a question. One of my best friend from growing up is a mother of a child that has special needs. Her mother was an educator who specialized in helping children with difficulties. Her brother had difficulties. She lives in North Carolina. She is not a future constituent, but she is in North Carolina, and she has had unending challenges trying to get the services she needs, the support she needs, everything. Just from even figuring out what her child needs. has been a challenge, and she's had to fight every inch. And her mother even came down and tried to help her with this. I think, I don't want to say that Jen, I have a friend whose name is Jen Dreyer, and she's on the phone, and she's an advocate here. So I don't want to speak to how things are here. I just know that they are not as good. I know that they are awful. I know that they are awful in North Carolina. And I was wondering if you could just explain how, and this is something I'm seeing across the country as I talk to candidates from different parts of the country, the erosion of public education, the erosion of these fundamental services that we are providing for our children, which also impact our families. You talked about having to basically stay at home and homeschool your child because the services were not available. Suddenly that's a reality for a lot of us. You know, I'm employed, but I might not be this fall because I might have to stay home and educate my children. And I'm lucky enough that my family can survive doing that. But if you could speak to that a little bit more, I think that would be, this is your forte. So I really want to get that message out there for the people that can't join us. So if you could speak a little bit more about that. I guess that's not a question. It's kind of just an opening to just elaborate a little bit more about your experiences, and for the people that might have had different, just talk more about that. Sorry, I'm going to be quiet now.
So, a lot of that just goes back to not having an adequate budget to give us teachers who are qualified and to give us the support staff we need in the schools. There should be a special ed person. We call them EC teachers, exceptional children. There should be one in every school. There should be a speech therapist available in every school. We all have seen the stats. We have seen that there is a growing population of children on the spectrum, whether you believe it's growing or whether it's just diagnosed more now. There's a need to support these kids and help them be successful. So to start with, we've got to attract and retain people who are qualified to work with them. That includes teacher pay, incentives to get them to acquire the education required to fill that role. It includes, paying to support a support person in every school. We don't even have a social worker or a nurse in every school in North Carolina because we've had to cut so much. We need to fully fund that education budget. It also includes early intervention strategies, and that's not just for kids on the spectrum. That's for all kids at greater risk. That includes people who may be coming from a lower socioeconomic background. So we need to be able to pinpoint those kids who need help before they start school so that they don't start out already behind, right? And we can help them have the tools they need to catch up or, be on par with their peers who are more advantaged.
So Nicole, Jen has a follow-up question. She says, is there a mechanism to sue the state or municipality to fund adequate support that meets the IDA requirements for each school? I hope I'm saying that right. I don't think, is it IDA or is it, do you say idea? IDEA, sorry. I'm not even saying it right, sorry. It's been a long day. Do you understand the question?
Yes, and actually, that is covered under the lawsuit I mentioned earlier. It's called the Leandro suit that North Carolina just lost because our state constitution does require every student in this state is promised a public school education. They've been sued. The state has been sued for not meeting that constitutional requirement. So when the Leandro suit was lost, there was a firm that made a list of recommendations for how North Carolina can go about meeting its constitutional requirements to the students of the state. And it includes retaining quality teachers, attracting and retaining them. It includes getting our per pupil spending up. It includes providing that support staff in every school. And it includes helping those students who are at risk and who are falling behind in the achievement gap for whatever reason, whether it's because they are students with disabilities or whether it's because they're students who are economically deprived. We're supposed to be addressing that because we have a constitutional mandate to do that. So over the coming months, I don't know if this Republican legislature will even bother trying to address that. They're trying to, end the session and be done. But we're going to have to address it when the legislature goes back into session. And all the Democratic legislators are on board with fulfilling the requirements of that Leandro lawsuit. So it's got to be addressed. It's not something they can continue to ignore.
Thank you so much. I have a question from Carol. What is the unemployment percentage in the district, and is there a drug addiction program?
So I am not sure of the specific unemployment numbers right now because we know that's gone up over the past couple of months, so I don't have current numbers. We were having fairly decent unemployment rate. The issue wasn't the unemployment before COVID. It was with a living wage, because so many folks were working, but they were working in service industry jobs that didn't pay them a living wage. So that was why I was focused on trying to put in place some sort of work development program that trained them for better jobs, for emerging technologies and emerging industries here, because we have lost so many good paying jobs in furniture and textiles, and the replacements have either been service industry that didn't pay well, or they've been jobs that those workers who were working manufacturing aren't qualified to fill now. They need more training.
Sheena, you had another question. Do you want to ask it, or do you want me to do it? She says, this is a hot one. Are you in favor of schools opening in a couple weeks?
So my primary goal is public safety. And, I am conflicted about this because I know that there are people in our county who suffer when schools aren't open. We have families where the parents have to work and they can't afford childcare, and school serves that role for them. We have kids who the only meals they get are those reduced lunches. We know that abuse goes up when kids are home and not in school, and the school system isn't able to identify that when they're not there. So there are issues about not resuming school that concern me, but right now our number one priority has got to be public safety in the face of this pandemic. So what my county superintendent has done is she has delayed in-person school for 5 weeks. We're going to do 5 weeks of virtual school, and at that point in time, they'll evaluate whether to do a mix of virtual school and in-person schooling. And the ideal would be that, everyone who could continue to virtual school would do so. And that would mean there were smaller numbers going into the school system that could split them up over the buildings, and they wouldn't be as crowded and would be at less risk of, catching COVID. So that's the current plan. I have to say I support our governor. I think he's done the best job he could with trying to control the spread of the virus here. He's had a lot of pushback. We've had protest on the steps of the Capitol because we have a strong anti-shutdown movement here, a strong anti-mask movement. But he's held strong kicked the Republican convention out of Charlotte so that we could try to keep people safe. And I think we're going to continue to do that. He's given the school systems the leeway to make that happen.
So I want to be conscious of time. We're at 8:21. We cannot thank you enough for being here. And I think this is probably a good segue. If you have more questions, we can get them to Nicole. If you want to put them in the chat, I'm going to be sending up a follow-up email. Specific to Nicole, we've put there's a link in the chat for a weekend of action this weekend to help get the word out. But I just wanted to say, so last cycle in 2018, this group, Ward 3, Blue Wave, we raised $12,000. I think it was for 8 candidates. 4 of those candidates won. We helped break a supermajority, which allowed the Democratic governor, who was doing so much good, to have his veto power back. It doesn't seem like a big victory, but it's been an absolutely huge victory.
It has.
Do you want to speak to that victory? I mean, I feel like there are a lot of stories. I don't live in North Carolina. I've only watched it from afar, but Sydney Batch is a story that I know a lot of people in our group have heard about. The GOP has just been, if you had to cast a political villain, I just feel like the GOP in your area has done, so many wrong things.
They have been horrible. I guess you probably heard about the attempted veto override on 9/11 here. So again, my opponent's Republican majority whip, and a lot of the Democrats were not in the House that morning because they had been told there wouldn't be any votes that morning. And my opponent was sitting there on his cell phone telling all of his colleagues in the Republican Party to be in their seats because they were going to override the governor's veto that morning. And they successfully did that. Luckily, they weren't able to do it in the Senate, so the veto was still upheld. But, they continue to do things like that. But one of the bills I'll just mention that was stopped because we were able to break the supermajority in 2018 was a Born Alive bill that they were trying to push through. And that's just one of the horrendous pieces of legislation that we've been able to prevent because Governor Cooper did have access to that veto and because we broke the supermajority.
Yeah, and that's, so I think it's worth mentioning that this group last year did 10,000 postcards. I think it was 3,500 of those were from Martha Schaefer, who actually reached out to me because she remembered us. She remembered us and our postcards. She remembered that there was this group in DC that did a phenomenal job postcarding for her. And so she's working for you, which frankly is like all the endorsement I need. I think that's fantastic, and you were organized early, and that was really exciting. And we also canvassed. We did not canvass. We had a real powerhouse canvasser, Hugh, who was down in North Carolina, but the rest of us were not able to get there, as I previously mentioned, because of the 2 hurricanes and a bunch of other things that happened. So what we're trying to do this time is really just double our efforts. Last time we raised $12,000. We are aiming to raise $25,000.
Wow.
We are trying to raise that money for the Future Now Fund candidates. We have a giving circle this year. That's a little bit of a different setup. So last cycle, we were raising for individual candidates as we went on. And that was a little bit difficult because we were having to do a lot of research to figure out who had how much money when, a lot of not, bothering candidates. Nicole, you just gave a great synopsis of where you are, why you still need money, why what you read on Ballotpedia that says looks like you might have more money, but maybe that's not actually the reality. Your competitor actually just got a bunch of ad buys. So it doesn't tell, the internet research that the layperson has access to is not the full story of what's going on. I would argue that Future Now Fund is doing a lot of this research. That's why I went to them, because they're doing all the hard work, all the heavy lifting, figuring out exactly what dollars we need to spend where in North Carolina to make this victory happen. So Nicole is one of their candidates. Amy Steele is another one of their candidates. The 4 candidates that won last time, Sydney Batch, Terrence Everett, Julie Van Hoffen, and Christy Clark, are all part of this roster again this year. We have, I want to say, at least 4 women of color, which is a really big deal because I know that, just to be blunt, the North Carolina State House is pretty white and male. No rainbow wave. You've got like, I think you do not have a rainbow wave. You do not have it's not representational. It does not represent your state. And we in DC understand that. So this year, what we're really asking everyone here is to help us with this. This is a heavy lift. This is a big lift. This is more than we've ever taken on before. And we need your help to do that. So number one, we're asking you to donate. If you can donate today, we want you to donate. If you need to think about it, that's fine. But the sooner we can get everybody in North Carolina this money, the better. $25,000 is a lot of money, but what's different is that at this level, that money is substantial. That money actually moves the needle. That money is impactful. This is the place. It is 2020, and if we do not flip the North Carolina State House, we are not going to have a seat at the table when they redistrict for the next decade.
Right.
That means we are going to be redistricted out of democracy for another decade. In 2010, between 2010 and 2016, we lost 1,000 state legislative seats across the country. 1,000 seats. And that meant that that is the voter suppression, the gerrymandering, all of the things that you have seen. Those things lead to voter disenfranchisement. So when you keep voting and you don't see the results that you're supposed to see, when you don't see the people that you're voting for elected, that means you don't vote anymore because you don't see your voice. You don't see anyone representing you. When your elected official doesn't host town halls because they know they don't have to talk to you, because gerrymandering means that they're going to have their seat for the next decade, they don't talk to you and they don't listen to you, and that results in everything that Nicole has been talking about tonight. We have a shot at this. We have a shot at this year. If we can flip this state house, we will get congressional seats next cycle. If we have independent redistricting, this state will finally be Democratic blue as well as North Carolina blue. So this is why we're coming to you. What we want you to do is we need you to donate. We want you to donate. You can donate $5. You can donate $100. You can donate whatever you can. We would really like it to be, we want it to be significant. This is where the fight is. We want to build this victory up from the State House to the White House, because when federal leadership falls down, states are left to pick up the pieces, and that is exactly what we're seeing right now. We have a lack of federal response to COVID. That means that we are only as strong as our weakest neighbor. And our weakest neighbor can be in Florida if they can still have flights to our states. So that's why this moment right now is so, I think it's actually easier to tell this story right now because we're so directly impacted by everything that's going on. So I'm going to put a link in for our giving circle. If you can donate tonight, that's great. Even if you can't donate that much, that's okay. We understand this is a really difficult time. There are so many worthy causes. There are people that are unemployed. There's Black Lives Matter. We are working on a lot of different fronts. Those are all over here. Those are very important, immediate things that are happening right now, and we need to help those causes. I'm not telling you not to help those causes. We have people that are in need. We have people that are trying to fund their COVID treatment because they don't have enough money because they don't have health insurance. They've lost their jobs. They now have COVID. They can't pay for it. Very important. But if we don't work on the structural things that are causing these issues are going to keep piling up, and we're not going to be able to do those GoFundMes. We can't keep up with this pile if we don't help this pile. So we really need to enact these structural changes. We need to elect people like Nicole. We need to flip North Carolina. We need to help states be as strong as our federal government, which is awful right now. I mean, we need to work on all of these things. We need to, I think this moment has really ripped bare everything that is wrong with our political structure right now. And we have a real shot at changing things if we lean in here. So I put the link in there. Sorry. So I put the link in. We also have, so if you can donate, that's wonderful. Even better if you can get friends to donate. If you can send, if we're gonna put this video online, we want more people to get involved. We want more people to come to North Carolina and help us do this work. If you can get your friends, even if it's just donating $5, it means that they're invested. It means that they know about this race. It means that they're gonna start following these candidates and they're gonna get to know them and understand why. even if you just tell them about why this level matters so much, that's a huge step. That's really helpful. We also, Nicole talked about this a little bit. We put a phone banking link in there. We cannot canvass. I was planning on canvassing. Austin was planning on canvassing. We had canvassing trips lined up. The Democratic State Committee we were going to do a lot of different things. We were all going to be spending money on canvassing. We're now investing that money in candidates, but we need to be investing our time in phone banking. I think I meant to put this up, but there's a great impact statement where, I don't know if you have these numbers, Nicole, but we're not talking about a congressional race. This is a state race. That means that if you invest $5,000, you can hopefully sponsor a phone bank that would reach 10,000 voters. And that's really impactful work. That's how we're going to win this. If we can help fund these things, but also if we can staff them, we can do this. We can phone people. We are in DC. You can do this work from anywhere. We can virtually phone bank people. We can talk to voters in North Carolina, make sure they know how to vote, make sure they know that if they're registered or not, make sure they know to vote for Nicole. As previously mentioned, there is a Senate seat in North Carolina. Senator Tillis won by the slimmest majority in North Carolina history. He entered this unpopular. His popularity has only diminished. He is now a major Trump supporter. He lines up all the time for Trump, and he's actually less popular now than when he took office. This is an easy pickup, but it is an easy pickup in one of the worst voting environments we've ever had. We do not know how people are going to vote, and we need to help candidates like Nicole, all of these candidates, because they are the ones who have contacts in the communities. They are the ones who are reaching out to let people know how to vote, when to vote, how to make sure they have a voting plan. Okay, so donate, tell your friends to donate. Also, tell your friends to volunteer. Bring a friend everywhere. Bring a friend to this work. One of the best pitches I've heard about this, you're not asking for money, you're not asking for time, you are inviting people to power. This is power. When Trump was elected, all of us, maybe I'm speaking too much, but I felt powerless. I had no idea how that happened. It was so antithetical to me. I just didn't understand how it happened. Doing this work, working for state candidates, rebuilding the Democratic Party with people that care about issues that affect us all. This is the work that is giving me power again. And when you invite people to this work, you give them back their power. You show them how this happened. They understand their government. Government impacts us all. There's no way around that. Our government impacts all of our lives. So this is an education, but it's also an invitation to power again. And lastly, sorry, I'm preaching. I feel badly. This was Sandy and Naomi's meeting. So lastly, I'm really excited because I call postcarding the gateway drug. A lot of people start by postcarding because it's something easy you can do from home. It's comfortable. It's not, it's not an imposition. It's just a little postcard that slips through the door, but it's got really important information. I don't have hard data that tells me how effective it was. We were actually going to study this in 2018. Massive hurricanes happened. Mail went all over the place. But anecdotally, there were at least a few voters who said, I got this postcard. I was displaced from my home. I didn't know where to go. I was able to forward my mail. I got this postcard. This postcard told me how to get in touch with the people who told me how to vote. So postcarding does work-ish. We don't know how well, but what we do know is that we actually have two really good portals. It's an easy thing that you can do. You can do it while you phone bank. You can do it while you do a million other things. The most important thing is that you can do it when you're not canvassing. You can do it when you're safely at home, and you can do it at little to no expense or imposition to the campaign, which is something that we're really trying to avoid. We don't want to see Nicole anymore. Nicole needs to go back to North Carolina, be with her people, be advocating for voters to come out for her. Sorry. So if we can do postcards, that would be great. We have two portals now. We have one in Arlington. That is for local pickup. We have pickup. I'm going to put it in the link. Oh no, it's not coming up for me. Sorry, I'm preaching. So our friends in Arlington, who are a well-oiled machine, have put this together. You can go on, you can request postcards for Nicole. Once you've done all of Nicole's postcards, you can go down the list. Huge list of North Carolina voters. And we also have postcards for Virginia is now postcards for North Carolina. Did I just send that just to Emily? I'm sorry, Emily. I'm all over the place. It's been a long day. Here. So this is postcards for North Carolina. We now have postcards for North Carolina. Anyone across the country, you can share this link wide and far. You can order your own postcards. They will be delivered to your house. You do not have to touch anyone. You don't have to talk to anyone. You can do them all from the safety of your own house. Personal plug, my friend actually designed the one for North Carolina. It's got vital voting information for everybody who lives in North Carolina. And one of the things that we're dealing with here in DC, and we're going to be dealing with it across the country, is how do we vote? We need to do this now. We need to be getting information to people how they vote. In some places, they need to be registered and ready to go by September. So we need to be getting this information out to people. If you have people in North Carolina, you need to be reaching out to them to let them know how to vote. Sorry, so that was a lot. I feel like I talked for a long time. Does anyone have questions? I can't imagine I didn't cover anything. Comments? Gripes, anything?
Hi, Elizabeth. This is probably a silly question, but she knows, it's silly that I don't know the answer, but the postcards come with stamps, yes?
That's a very good question. I think right now they do not come with stamps.
Okay.
Usually, the stamps are pretty much the most expensive part.
Okay.
We're trying to work, in DC, we're trying to work with the Democratic State Committee to pay for stamps for these because that's the most expensive part of postcarding. And we also want to make sure that nobody is prohibited from postcarding because it's too expensive. Postcards, cheap, stamps, expensive. So
Sheena, we're working on making it free for everyone to do this, but right now, stamps have to be paid. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, and then there are directions on the website for how you go about doing that. In the past, what we've done is, I think for Martha, we actually did the postcards and physically mailed them back. And then I think she stamped them and sent them. But there are different ways that each campus. So it's one portal and it really helps.
Okay, thanks.
Could I put a topic on the table that we don't really have to discuss, but voter protection in this election? Because I'm a lawyer and I've been doing this in a lot of elections, including in the blue wave. And I just wondered what the plans are and how we can get involved to make sure they don't mess with the vote on election day.
Do you have anything to say about that, Nicole? Or
Yeah, I am passionate about voter protection. That's why, I ended up jumping onto those gerrymandering cases. So here, what we're doing is, number one, we partnered with the NAACP and we got an injunction on the voter ID law that they tried to put in place. Now, our legislature just recently tried to push that voter ID law back in play. They tried to tie it to one of our COVID relief bills. It is not yet, but we are trying to prevent that voter ID law from going through. And if we take the majority, of course, we're going to make sure that that never happens. No voter ID. We also have been trying to increase our early voting sites. They passed some legislation last year. They tried to eliminate voting sites, and the way they phrased it was that they were eliminating voting sites in areas with low voter turnout. But those also happen to be low-income areas, minority neighborhoods, where the folks wouldn't be able to go anywhere else, right? Because they wouldn't have access to transportation or the money to get a ride, pay for a bus fare, whatever. So we have expanded early voting sites so that they're more. We're making sure they're not eliminating them from minority neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods. We have expanded early voting times so that there are more opportunities to vote. We are pushing to try to get Election Day off, at least 2 hours off on election day as paid time off, so that people who have to work can go vote still without being penalized at their jobs. Other things we're doing for voter. We pushed through in our county hand-marked paper ballots because we kept having issues with our electronic voting machines. People would vote, and then they would see at the bottom the tape in the machine would not agree with the vote they thought they had cast.
Oh boy.
So people were feeling really concerned that their votes weren't being counted. I mean, let's face it, the Republican Party here has done everything they can to disenfranchise certain groups of voters in the state. So we did push through hand-marked paper ballots for my county. So that's going to be in place for this election. We are trying to get postage covered on absentee ballots because, you know, that's really just, it's essentially a poll tax. If people can't go out and vote because of COVID and they're trying to vote absentee, but they have to pay for the postage and they can't afford it, you know, you're again disenfranchising that group of voters. We haven't made any progress on that yet. Again, working with the NAACP to try to push that through. We did eliminate one requirement on absentee voting. Previously, we were required to get 2 witnesses for an absentee ballot. That was going to be impossible for people who were isolating because of COVID.
Yes.
So they did decrease that to just 1. There's still 1 witness required to sign off on that ballot, but it's an improvement. We'll keep pushing. So those are some of the things we're doing to try to protect the vote here, and we'll keep fighting.
Well, I'm available. You know, good work.
Well,
Good
you know,
work. It's a tough business, you know.
all right,
I
that's
mean,
great.
if we had done this in 2000, Gore would have won. It was pure voter intimidation in Miami-Dade, and let us never forget, never again.
We are even getting feedback from our state party. You know, we have a boiler room attorneys who are supposed to be protecting the vote, trying to help us look out for these sorts of things. And we're already getting feedback that, you know, there are people planning to go through minority neighborhoods and stuff flyers in their boxes about voting times and giving them wrong dates and locations so that they're showing up a day late or at the wrong location. So there are all sorts of things that we're trying to stay on top of, be proactive about addressing, make sure the information's out there so that people are not disenfranchised this election.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very encouraging.
I want to add some more about voter protection. There are 2 main groups doing it. Well, there are more than 2, but nationally, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights is doing it and really needs volunteers. The Democratic Party puts a lot in, and I think works with directly with the North Carolina Democratic Party. I actually have made a preliminary contact with somebody doing North Carolina voter protection, and they're supposed to be getting back to me. And as soon as I have more information, I will share it. Stacey Abrams' group is going to be doing voter protection. I don't know how many states they're going to be doing it in. So those are some of the major efforts.
Good, that's excellent. Well, let's rock and roll with this.
Right, so I put a ton of information in the chat. One of the things we want everyone on this call to do, we raised a little bit of money tonight, but we have a huge goal. We're trying to raise $25,000. That's more than we've ever raised in one cycle. So we need everybody's help. I would argue that we call this money ball for politics. You know where your money is going. We will show you the receipts. It is all going to elect candidates and to help their campaigns in North Carolina. It's going to the flippable seats. It's not going to be spent anywhere else. But we need more people to be at this level, at this fight. The example I always use is John Ossoff. John Ossoff raised $23 million for a special election that he lost. He broke every congressional record. If you had taken that $23 million and spent even just part of that, even just $5 million of that money on Georgia's state house elections, Stacey Abrams would be governor today. And that is the story. That is the takeaway. If we invest at this level, you flip the state house, you turn out voters who are very likely to vote. I'm not going to say that they're going to 100% going to vote up, but I will tell you they're extremely likely to vote up the ballot because they've heard of Cal Cunningham, they've heard of Joe Biden. But we need to turn out voters for Nicole quick, because if we turn out voters for her, and if we have a seat at the table for redistricting, when we redistrict and we have fair districts, we will have more congressional seats and we will have more people that represent the actual districts that they were voted to represent. And that is the takeaway. That is democracy. And I think that's why many of us are here right now. In addition to the whole host of issues that Nicole talked about, the environment, public education, all of our social safety nets, healthcare, everything that impacts all of our lives. You know, they're the issues that come up when you have problems with them. But in North Carolina, people have problems with these things all of the time. So that's the takeaway. Sandy, Naomi, do you want to say something? I just want to say thank you so much, Nicole. Do you have any parting words of wisdom?
No. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you and everything you're doing to help us. And it makes a difference. You saw that in 2018, as you mentioned. It makes a difference. And we can use the help right now. I think I'll throw a number out there that my campaign manager gave me just this weekend. $1,000 is a week of digital ads. So every dollar makes a difference right now, and it makes more of a difference at the state level. Thank you.
Yeah. I think having, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Thank you so much for coming, and to everyone else, thank you so much for coming. Maybe next time we can have you all over here, or in a year or two for the next election round. But we're so excited to be doing this right now over Zoom. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Nicole and Elizabeth, for all of that information.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. And let's just keep doing this work. I think we're gonna have to have another meeting because we're not there tonight. We did not make $25,000. So what we'd like for everyone is to come up with 10 names. If you can, I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to send you information with the donation link. I'm going to send you the phone banking information. We have less than 100 days. Less than 100 days until the election. We absolutely need to get to work. We need to do it now, and we need to do it basically every weekend until election time. So we've got phone banking links, we've got postcarding links, and we have no excuses. This is the election of our lifetimes, and we need to make it count. So we'll be sending that information out, and what we would like is if you can come back to us with 10 email addresses. We want to invite more people to this work and to this power and to this movement so that we have a victory in November and none of us have any regrets. We know we did everything we possibly could to impact this election and make sure candidates like Nicole and everyone else in North Carolina have representation. And Sheena, thank you so much for joining us from North Carolina. All right, I'm gonna call it. This is it. I'm calling it. We done? We're done? We're all good? Everyone gets on with their Monday night? Thank you for joining us on a Monday too. And Jen,
Surf's up, by the way.
thank you. I also want to wish a happy anniversary to Jen Dreyer. She's here on her 12th wedding anniversary. She spent it with us. I don't know if that's a condemnation of your marriage or a testament to it. Cheers.
Thank you.
I'll send some champagne to Kurt. All right. Thank you all so much.